I spent 35 years teaching other people's children how to find their voices. I never imagined I would one day have to teach my own daughter to find hers again. My name does not matter for this story. What matters is that I am a mother. I am 62 years old, and I have seen enough of this world to know when something is wrong before it announces itself. That is what 35 years as a school principal teaches you. You learn to read a room before you walk into it. You learn to notice what people are not saying. You learn that the quietest children are sometimes the ones carrying the heaviest things. So when my daughter called me on a Tuesday evening in March, 3 months after her wedding, and said everything was fine before I had even asked, I sat down at my kitchen table and I listened to the silence underneath her words. She had met my son-in-law at a work conference in Atlanta. She was 28 at the time, sharp and funny and so full of herself in the best possible way. She had her father's laugh and my stubbornness, and she had built a career in nonprofit fundraising that she was genuinely proud of. She called me every Sunday morning. We talked for an hour, sometimes two. She had never been the kind of woman who disappeared. He came into her life like a solution to a problem she did not know she had. That is the only way I can describe it now. He was tall and well-dressed, and he worked in finance. He brought her flowers on the second date. He remembered things, small things, the kind of things that make a woman feel truly seen. He remembered that she hated cilantro. He remembered the name of her college roommate. He sat across from me at my dining room table the first time she brought him home, and he asked me about my career with what looked like genuine interest. He said the world needed more educators like me. I liked him. That is the part of this story that still catches in my throat when I say it out loud. I liked him. I thought he was good for her. When she called me 6 months later to say he had proposed, I cried happy tears into the phone, and I drove to her apartment that same weekend to look at the ring. It was beautiful. He had chosen it himself, without her input, because he had paid attention. I did not know yet that paying attention can also be a form of surveillance. The wedding was in September. She wore her grandmother's pearls, and she looked like everything I had ever hoped for her. My son-in-law cried at the altar. His mother sat in the front row in a cream-colored suit and dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. I remember thinking she seemed like a proud woman. I remember thinking that was a good thing. The Sunday morning calls became Sunday evening calls. Then they became calls every other week. She always had a reason. They had plans. He had surprised her with a trip. She had been tired. The reasons were never alarming on their own. It was the pattern that should have told me something, and I told myself I was being a mother who couldn't let go. I told myself she was building a life. I told myself this was what marriage looked like from the outside. About 8 months after the wedding, I drove down to visit for a long weekend. She met me at the door looking beautiful, as always, but something about the way she hugged me was different. It was faster, like she was checking a box. He was charming the entire visit. He made dinner the first night, poured wine, told a long story about a golf trip that made us all laugh. But twice that evening, when my daughter started to tell a story of her own, he spoke over her. Not rudely, smoothly, the way someone changes a radio station without acknowledging there was music already playing. And both times, she stopped. She did not push back. She just folded her hands in her lap and let him finish, and then smiled at me as if nothing had happened. I noticed. I did not say anything. I told myself I did not have enough to say anything. Before I left, she walked me to my car. We stood in the driveway for a moment, and she said, almost casually, that she had been thinking about taking a step back from her job, just to focus on their home for a while. She said it the way someone recites something they have practiced. I asked her if that was what she wanted, and she said of course it was. Why would she say it if it wasn't? I drove home and I prayed I was wrong. Over the next year, I watched my daughter become someone I was slowly having to relearn. She stopped talking about her work, then she stopped working entirely. She stopped mentioning her friends by name. When I asked about them, She would say they had drifted apart, that people get busy, that it happens. She started prefacing things she said with small apologies. She would say, I might be wrong about this, but, and then say something perfectly reasonable that needed no apology at all. She laughed differently, shorter. He, meanwhile, was the same man in every room, confident, opinionated. He had a way of correcting her in public that was dressed up as affection. He would put his arm around her and say something like, That is not quite how it happened, sweetheart, and then tell the story his way. And she would laugh softly and say, You are right. You always remember better than I do. She started saying that a lot, that he remembered better than she did. I am a school principal. I know what it looks like when someone has been taught to doubt themselves. I know the specific shape of it. I had seen it in children who came from difficult homes, the way they apologized for their own answers before they gave them, the way they made themselves small before anyone else could do it for them. I had spent 35 years working to undo exactly that in young people, and I was watching it happen to my own child, in slow motion, in someone else's living room, and I did not yet have the words to name it in a way she would hear. His mother was a constant presence in their lives. She called daily. She had opinions about how her son's house was run, what was cooked, how it was decorated, whether my daughter was keeping up appearances appropriately. She never said anything cruel directly to me. She was too careful for that. But I heard things through my daughter's careful non-answers. I pieced together the shape of the woman from what was left unsaid. Once, during a phone call, my daughter mentioned that her mother-in-law had told her that a woman's job is to make her husband's life easier, not bigger. She said it plainly, like she was reporting a weather forecast. I asked her what she thought about that. She paused for a long time and then said, Well, there might be some truth to it. That was not my daughter talking. That was something that had been put inside her and left to grow. Things came to a point on a Saturday in October. It was my birthday weekend. She had invited me to dinner at their home, just the four of us, she said. Her husband, his mother who was visiting for the week, and me. I drove 3 hours. I brought flowers. The evening started pleasantly enough. The table was set beautifully. There was wine. She had cooked for hours. I could tell from the way the whole house smelled warm and careful. She brought out the food herself while he sat at the head of the table and talked to his mother about something on the news. She set down the main dish, and he looked at it and said, This again? 2 words. That is all it took to change the temperature of the entire room. She said, quietly, that she had made it because I loved it, because it was my birthday dinner. He said, without looking at her, that she should have asked him first before planning a menu. She apologized. She actually apologized. She sat down and looked at her plate and apologized for cooking a meal she had spent hours making for my birthday. I set down my fork. His mother made a small sound that was almost a laugh. She said something about how her son had always had particular taste, as if this were a charming quality, as if what I had just watched was a personality quirk and not a man humiliating his wife at her own mother's birthday dinner. I looked at my daughter. She was not looking at me. She was looking at her hands in her lap, and in that moment I saw it all at once. The way you sometimes see the full shape of a thing only after you have been staring at one piece of it for too long. I saw every phone call that had grown shorter, every story she had stopped telling, every apology she had swallowed before I could protest, every time she had called and said everything was fine before I could ask. I saw my daughter, and she looked like someone who had been slowly taught that she took up too much space. I kept my voice very calm. I asked my son-in-law to please not speak to her that way. He looked at me then. He smiled. He said he appreciated my concern, but that what happened in his home was between him and his wife. His mother said, That is right. Every couple has their way. I said, Not this way. He stood up from the table. He was not a small man, and he knew it. He had the kind of height and breadth that fills a doorway, and when he stood, I could feel the room adjust around him. He said my name, just my name, the way a teacher says a student's name right before consequences. He told me, very calmly, that I had overstepped, that I was a guest in his home, and that I should remember that. My daughter said, very quietly, "Please, let us just eat." And then he turned to her, and I watched something shift in his face. The smile went somewhere else, and what was left was something flat and certain. He told her that she needed to learn to manage her family. He told her that inviting her mother without checking with him had been disrespectful. He said this slowly, the way someone explains something to a child, and then he reached across and he took her wrist. It was not a strike. Let me be precise about that. He did not hit her. What he did was grip her wrist across the table in a way that made her go completely still, in a way that told me without any uncertainty that this grip was a familiar language between them, that she knew exactly what it meant, that she had felt the full dictionary of what it could become. She went still the way prey goes still. His mother looked at her nails. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I did not make a scene. 35 years of managing children in crisis and parents in panic and board meetings gone sideways had given me a particular kind of stillness that I have learned to be grateful for. I stood up from that table and I picked up my purse and I looked at my son-in-law and I said, "Let go of her arm." He did. Slowly. The way someone makes letting go look like a choice they are generous enough to offer. I looked at my daughter and I told her I loved her, and I told her my door was open. Always. Any hour. She looked like she was about to cry. She looked like she was also afraid of what would happen after I left. I wanted to take her with me, but I had spent enough years working with families in crisis to know that you cannot remove someone from a situation before they are ready. What you can do is make sure they know they are not alone. What you can do is make the door as wide and as clearly lit as possible. I walked to my car. I sat in the driveway for a moment, and then I took out my phone. I want to tell you about the call I made, because I think it matters. I did not call the police. Not yet. I called a woman I had known for 22 years. A woman I had met at a community leadership summit when we were both just starting out in our careers. She had spent the last 15 years as the director of a domestic violence advocacy organization in our state. She had a network of attorneys and social workers and law enforcement contacts and judges who trusted her. More importantly, she had spent those 15 years learning every mechanism that existed to protect women in situations like my daughter's. I told her what I had seen. I told her about the wrist, about the pattern, about the year and a half of slow erosion I had watched and not known how to name. When I finished, she said, "You did the right thing calling me." We made a plan. Over the next 3 weeks, she connected me with a family law attorney who specializes in coercive control cases. She connected me with a therapist who makes house calls under the guise of wellness visits, so that a woman who is being monitored can access help without her partner knowing. She helped me understand the language coercive control, financial abuse, isolation tactics, so that when I sat down with my daughter, I would not be speaking from emotion alone, but from fact. She also told me something I have thought about every day since. She said that the most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship is not the first incident. It is the moment when the victim begins to believe they deserve what is happening, because by then, the abuser does not even need to be in the room anymore. I drove back to my daughter's home 2 weeks later. He was at work. I sat across from her at the same table where my birthday dinner had turned to ash. And I said her name. And I did not stop talking until I had named every single thing I had watched happen, one by one, without accusation, without anger, in the same tone I had used for 35 years to tell a child something hard that they needed to hear. She cried for a long time. She told me I was exaggerating. She told me I had always been overprotective. She told me that I did not understand what their marriage was really like. I said, I know. I know I don't understand all of it. But I know what I saw at that table. She did not ask me to leave. I came back 3 more times. The therapist began her visits. The attorney put together documentation of what would be needed. My daughter did not move quickly. Healing and leaving never move quickly, and anyone who has walked beside someone through it knows that you cannot rush the process without breaking it. You can only show up, and show up again, and show up one more time after that. In January, 4 months after my birthday dinner, my daughter called me at 6 in the morning. She said she needed me to come. I was in my car within 8 minutes. I will not tell the details of what happened that night because those details belong to her and not to this story. What I will tell you is that the attorney was ready. The advocate was ready. Within 24 hours of that phone call, there were legal documents filed, a protective order in place, and my son-in-law was explaining himself to people who had heard every version of his explanation before and were not impressed. His mother called me once during that time. She told me I had destroyed her son's marriage. She told me that I had interfered in something I did not understand. I listened to her until she was finished, and then I told her that the only thing I had done was show up for my child the way a mother is supposed to. I did not hear from her again. My daughter moved in with me in February. She slept for the first 4 days like someone who had been running a very long race and had only just found a place to stop. She ate at my kitchen table. She watched old movies. She called her friends, the ones she had quietly dropped over the past 2 years, and some of them answered on the first ring. The therapist came twice a week. There is something I want to say directly, if you will let me. If you are watching this and something in this story sounded familiar, not exactly like your story, but close enough that something in you shifted, I want you to know that what you felt just now is important. That feeling is your voice, and it has been there this whole time, even if someone has been working very hard to make you doubt it. The things I watched happen to my daughter did not start with a wrist grabbed across a dinner table. They started with a man who paid enough attention to know exactly what she valued, so that he could, piece by piece, take it away. They started with small corrections dressed as affection, with Sunday morning calls that moved to evenings that moved to every other week, with a woman who had been funny and full of herself in the best possible way, slowly learning to preface everything she said with an apology. That is where it starts. Not with a hand raised, with a woman taught to make herself smaller, one day at a time, until she forgets the size she used to be. But I also want you to know this. The size is still there. I watched my daughter find it again, and it was not gone. It had just been stored somewhere quiet, waiting for the room to be safe enough to take it out. She is doing well now. She started consulting work again in the spring, part-time at first, then more as her confidence returned. She goes for long walks on Saturday mornings. She calls me on Sundays again, sometimes for 2 hours. She laughs the way she used to laugh, wide open, no rationing. Last month she told me about a first date she went on, someone she met through a colleague. She said he was kind. She said he asked her questions, and then actually waited for the answers. She laughed a little when she said it, and then she got quiet for a moment, and she said, I forgot that was something a person could do. I told her I knew. And I told her she deserved someone who would keep doing it. There is one more thing I want to say before I close. I have been a school principal for most of my adult life. I have sat across from a lot of mothers in that time. Mothers who came to me because their child was struggling and they did not know why. Mothers who were angry. Mothers who were scared. Mothers who had driven miles to sit in my office because they had run out of other places to turn. And the question I was asked, more than any other, in one form or another, was simply, did I wait too long? To every mother sitting somewhere right now asking herself that question, I want to say, you did not wait too long. You are here. That means you have not waited too long. The door is still open. The call can still be made. The language exists. The resources exist. The people who will know what to do exist. and they are waiting for you to find them. You are not overreacting. You are not imagining things. You are not overprotective or dramatic or difficult. You are a mother who is paying attention, and paying attention is the most important thing you can do. Make the call. And if you are not a mother, if you are the one living inside the house and not looking in from the driveway, please hear me. The size you used to be is still there. It has not gone anywhere. It is just waiting for the room to be safe enough. You deserve a room that is safe enough. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this story reached you somewhere real, please share it with someone who might need it. And tell me something, what city are you watching from tonight? And if any part of this story reminded you of something in your own life, what was the first thing you knew before you were ready to say it out loud? You do not have to answer that to anyone but yourself. But sometimes asking the question is the beginning of something. That is all I have for you today. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other.